I think it's time to hear from another Pearl Harbor survivor that I just met tonight. So, would you like to come up here and Don, and tell us a little bit about your service? Would it be easier for you to?
Thank you. My name is Don Wong, and as I sit here, no, I'll look funny. I just wanted to point out this picture caught my eye, and if any of you who probably have not had it, but would like an experience of sleeping in a Navy hammock, I don't know where they could get the Navy hammock anymore, but it is something that when you do it, I think you probably remember it for the rest of your life. You probably many times. When we got to boot camp, for me, that was March of 1941 at Great Lakes. We got off the train, went into the Great, and they issued us all hammocks. At the first nights, first 2 or 3 weeks, our hammocks were 4 feet off the floor, and they just a pipe over here and a pipe there, and the hammock strung between them and made very, very tight. If you'll notice on these, there are no boards or supports on either end. It's just all ropes, and that's what the Navy hammocks were. So we slept in those things for about 4 weeks, and believe me, with a bunch of kids off the farm, many fell out. There were some injuries. Then after 4 weeks, they raised them to 8-foot hammocks. Now that meant that those stanchions were up, that you could reach them if you just a little bitty jump. Grab 2 hammocks, put yourself upside down and get into your hammock. Really, it's an experience. I wouldn't recommend the 8-foot ones, but the 4-foot ones you might enjoy. I imagine you slept in hammocks many times. The only other time I did in the Navy after boot camp was when I was aboard ship. Otherwise, on shore stations, and I was aviation. So I spent some time on the ships, and then we had hammocks where it was in the mess hall. They take the mess tables down at the end of the day. The stanchions were there, string the hammocks, sleep there at night, take the hammocks down in the day, and now that's where you eat during the day. So it was a different Navy in those days. Well, like I said, back in 1941, I joined Great Lakes, Illinois, snotty-nosed kid, fresh off the farm, knew nothing, joined the Navy, see the world. Okay, I did sort of. That after finishing boot camp at Great Lakes, I was assigned to radio school at Alameda, where I received some training to become an aviation radioman. I finished that course, was assigned to a squadron in the Pacific of PBYs. We were VP-12. We were stationed in Hawaii at Kāneʻohe Bay, right across the island from Pearl Harbor. That I got there September, October 1941, and was one of the lowest guys on the totem pole, of course. And on the morning of December 7th, my section, we had the duty that somebody has to stay aboard all the time. And my assignment that day was to be aboard one of our airplanes, these old PBYs, flying boats, that was anchored in the bay, and it was, I'm going to say, the ready plane. I'm not real sure what the heck I was doing there, but I was assigned on this plane because they always keep somebody aboard the airplane when it's on the water in case it sprung a leak or something would drift into it, but that you could signal ashore and get help. Well, that was my assignment. I got aboard to the plane that they took me out in a boat about 7:45 in the morning. I was just getting ready to begin my, quote, day's operations, which was to include signal practice with shore personnel, when I heard aircraft overhead. I looked up and saw airplanes and figured that the Army Air Force was out doing their thing for some crazy reason on a Sunday. Well, that image didn't last too long, because the next thing, there was firing, there was bombs being dropped on the shore, the hangars were bombed, the other planes that were on the water, there were either 3 or 4 of us, and the one I was in, were all strafed by the aircraft. They were using incendiary bullets, and so the planes immediately burst into flame and burned and sunk. I was in one of them. the other fellows in the other plane, to the best of my knowledge, nobody else got out. But I was able to get out of the airplane, and there was burning water, all that. You see the pictures, how you swim through the burning oil and gasoline on the water. And I was able to do that. Incidentally, they had taught us how to do that at boot camp. So otherwise I feel I would have panicked. But that thought didn't really enter my mind, just get out of there. And so I did, and I swam over to a buoy, stayed there for about a half hour as the attack continued, and then a boat came out looking for survivors, and they came over to a buoy that I had found and was waiting there, and they picked me up and took me into shore. They said I looked pretty bad. I had some burns and been swimming through oil and gasoline. You can imagine what you look like, all black and dirty. So they hauled me off to sick bay, and I sat around there and waited till my burns got treated and stuff, and then we got some rifles from the armory, and under someone's command, I don't recollect who, that we decided that there would be an invasion on the beach that night from the Japanese, and so we slept on the beach for a couple of nights anticipating a land invasion, but fortunately it never came. Well, that's really the first day, 2 days of the war for me. The war hadn't even been declared. I was already wounded, but not too bad, and it all worked out, well, I shouldn't say very well for me, but after my experience there, they were looking for pilots, and I volunteered. I got sent to flight school. I got a commission. I spent 23 years playing around with the airplanes in the Navy, and have had a pretty darn good life since. Thank you. Does anyone have any specific question that I could?
I've got a question for you. What kind of
Okay,
planes did you fly?
Okay.
In the Navy, when you became a pilot, what did you fly?
That operationally, I was flying a multi-engine when we finished our flight training, because we were, quote, combat experienced, whatever that meant, but they kept us on as flight instructors, and I was in land-based bombers at that time. Since then, I've flown about 34 different jets, prop planes, ended up flying these Constellations, these three-tail jobbies that on the dual line out of Iceland. He was talking Murmansk and stuff that we've operated on Iceland up in that area too. But this was now the Cold War.
Yeah.
The war
But you quit the Navy after 23 years.
The Navy's got an up or out policy.
Well, thank you very much. Any other questions?
I want to know about the scarf.
What?
Your scarf, Don.
The scarf?
Oh, okay. This went back to 1941. Now I'm up to last Saturday. Yeah, but last Saturday, at the club meeting here in Concord with the Pearl Harbor survivors, I met some Rosie the Riveters here a number of months ago, and I admired that they wear this pattern, Rosie the Riveter, and they had, one of the girls was wearing this thing, and I said, I'm going to look for some material like that for a necktie. She just took it off and gave it to me. So that's why I have it. And now I have seven Rosie names on here that I have met, the Rosies. And if you are interested in this sort of stuff, and it is very interesting, their museum is over there in Richmond, right on the water. You can spend very, very pleasant number of hours there with them. Yeah, they're very, very nice.